We're talking today with Glen Bailey of Comstock Park, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay. Now, Glen, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in North Park, part of Kent County, north of Grand Rapids, at my grandmother's house.
Okay. And then, what year?
1932.
All right. Now, did you grow up in that area or move around?
I've lived in this area all my life, North Park, Comstock Park, and Rockford.
Okay. And what was your family doing for a living when you were growing up?
My father was a carpenter, and my mother was a stay-home.
Okay. And at the time you were born, 1932, that's the Depression era. Did your father have regular work, or was it on and off?
No, it was on and off. He was an independent carpenter, so he took what he got.
Now, did things pick up for him once the war started? Was there more work?
Well, I wouldn't say it did or didn't, because it was more or less the same way, because he worked on his own and he took what he got.
Okay.
So.
And how many kids were in your family?
There was 5 of us all together.
Okay, and where were you in line?
Second.
Okay. All right. Now, you were a kid during World War II. Did you pay much attention to what was going on then, or just...
No, not really. Not really. I mean, it was just something that was going on, and you didn't grasp it,
Mm-hmm.
And,
all right. Now, did you finish high school?
no, I did not.
Okay, so when did you leave school?
I finished the 7th grade, started the 8th grade, and left.
Okay, and how old were you at that time?
15.
Okay. And once you left, what did you do?
I went to work in a toilet seat factory when I was 15 years old.
Right.
My father died in 1947,
Okay.
just before I was 15. So
Okay. So you're going to work in part to help support the family at that
that's
point?
correct.
All right. Okay. And then how did you wind up in the Army?
Well, there was a lot of chaos right there with family. My mother had to go to work, and I had 3 sisters. My first brother had passed away when I was 5, and my mother had to go to work. And then there was, like I say, there was a lot of pressure and stuff like that. And when I turned 17, I went to her and I said, I'm thinking of going in the service, and she talked me out of it for a period of time, and then finally she gave in.
Did she have to sign for you?
Oh, yes.
Okay, because you were still
She
17.
had to sign for me to get in.
All right. So when did you enlist?
I enlisted in the 1st of August of
49?
1949, yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, where did they send you for basic training?
Kansas, Fort Riley, Kansas.
All right. Okay. Yeah. And how did they get you out to Fort Riley?
Uh,
Was there trains then, or
I
just buses?
That was a train, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Now, had you ever been out of the state of Michigan before?
Yes. I'd been to Indiana and Illinois, but that's about it.
Okay. All right. And then, what do you remember about the training there? What kind of reception did you get, and what did you do when you arrived?
Well, there was a whole bunch of us that arrived, and they lined us up and give us instructions and what we had to do, get uniforms and so on. And then we went just a normal basic training of what the Army showed you, I mean.
Okay. So, what did that actually consist of?
Well, shooting a gun and following instructions from your commanding officers, and
Was there much physical training?
oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
we had marches we had to do and stuff like that.
Okay. Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to life in the Army?
It was quite hard. It was quite hard because, I'd never been too far away from family, and it was quite hard. But
Okay. So you're homesick a little bit. Was it hard to follow orders, or were you used to that?
oh no, I could follow orders all right because I'd been used to that.
Now, how long was the basic training, do you think?
I'm trying to think. I can't remember.
Do you think maybe about 3 months or 2 months
It
or?
seems like it was a 3 months period, but I'm not.
Yeah, at that time, because this is still 49, the Korean War hasn't started. It was probably not sped up at that point. So
No.
3 months is pretty likely. Now, once you completed the basic training, what did you do next?
They sent me to Fort Carson, Colorado, which I continued some training. They sent me, our outfit was, took ski training in the mountains, which was a waste because when we went to Korea, or when I went overseas, I went where the weather was warm, and it was a waste of time.
Yeah, and it didn't get cold in Korea in the winter, but they wouldn't have needed ski troops probably.
No,
So,
no.
All right, so you're going to do that. Now, what kind of unit was based at Fort Carson? Was it just an infantry division or?
Armored.
It was an armored unit. All right. Now, did you work with armored vehicles at all while you were there?
I worked on trucks and stuff like that. I was a mechanic.
Okay. All right. And did you get specialized training as a mechanic there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what kind of trucks were you working on?
The 6x6s and Jeeps and 3/4 tons.
Yeah.
A variety of trucks.
All right, whatever they got.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, what was a daily life like there at Fort Carson? I mean, what was a typical day like once you?
Well, you just had your normal activities. When you took your turn to come up to do KP, you done KP and you done guard duty, and you had weekends mostly off. We'd go to town and
Okay, and what town was nearby?
there again, I can't think of the name. It's a closed town.
Okay, but there is a town with some stuff in it you can.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right. Now, in the unit you were in, what was the background of the other soldiers there? Were they all young kids? Did they have some World War II veterans?
We had World War II sergeants and stuff like that, but the majority of them were young people in their late teens, early 20s.
Okay. Now, at this point, was the unit still all white, or were there any black troops in there? Or
Very few.
okay.
Very few. Yeah.
All right. And at that time, did you notice any kind of tension between any of the blacks and whites, or?
No, we didn't have. The fact is, we had some Indians in our outfit too. The only problem we had with them is they would go to town and get drunk, and which they shouldn't have, but they would, and then they'd come home back to the barracks 2 o'clock in the morning. We had one Indian that would come in and shove every bunk over. So you know, it was just, and you got little groups of guys all together, and I had buddies that was from Wisconsin, and one from Oklahoma, and one from Nebraska, and one from, seems like I had one from Kentucky, and another one from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
We were kind of a group.
Okay. All right. Now, do you remember hearing about the start of the Korean War in 1950?
Oh yes.
And what happens once that? What happens to you at that point, and the guys you're with?
Well, the guys I were with, we had already been in transfer to the 1st Cavalry Division.
Okay.
We were in when the war started, so when we got there, we automatically went to the Korean War.
Okay. Because the 1st Cavalry Division had been based in Japan
Right.
at that point. And when the Korean War starts, they take anybody they can find, and that includes the 1st Cav, and in they go. So you're kind of following them in.
Well, we had joined the 5th Regiment before they went into Korea.
Okay. So you join them actually in Japan, but then they ship you out right
Yeah.
away? Okay. Now, first, how did they get you across the ocean?
Well, amphibious boats. There was no big boats. Because when we landed, our first sergeant was Second World War sergeant. And when we went on into Korea, I carried a Browning automatic at that time, and he said, anything that way that moves, shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Which we did, you know. And there was a clump of bushes, and they started to move, and I turned that Browning over and I emptied the clip. And consequently, we got up there and got to looking, and it was nothing but a big rooster pheasant. But he said to shoot, which we did,
Right.
because, you know, the Koreans had a habit of getting in the brush and so on.
Yeah, and at that point, that's still, so you're landing in Korea, you think it was July of 1950, or around there?
Around there, yeah. I you know, it's been so long
Sure.
that I can't remember, but
But that's very early in the campaign, and things are fluid, and you don't know who is where.
that's correct.
Okay,
And
all right.
in fact, there's the whole thing is kind of a mess. Different. They didn't know where anybody was.
Right. Actually, I want to back up a little bit in the story. I was asking about crossing the ocean, like the Pacific. How do you get from the U.S. over to Asia? Were you transport, or?
We went by ship.
And what was that trip like?
It was kind of tough too, because you had to serve KP duty, and there were so many people going that you would, if you was on KP, you was there all day, and then you would go to bed in hammocks in the ship, and
Well, what kind of ship were you on?
a troop ship.
Troop transport, but
Yeah.
bigger than a Liberty ship, but like a larger ship?
It was a big ship, yeah. I mean, it's hard to, you know, but
Okay. Now, did a lot of guys get seasick?
yes, yes.
All right. Did you get seasick?
No, I did not.
So how did you manage that?
Well, my father fished a lot too, and therefore we went out, you know, in boats and stuff like that, so it didn't really bother me.
The movement of the boat. Yeah. Now, was the weather good on the way across?
We had hit a couple of storms where you were, and then a lot of guys got sick.
Right. Okay. About how long do you think it took you to get across?
10
the Pacific?
days.
10 days. Okay. Now, did you actually go ashore in Japan at all?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you remember about that?
Sasebo.
Okay.
We unloaded there, and 2 days later we were moved out.
In the meantime, did you just stay on the base?
Yes,
Okay.
we were not allowed off the base.
All right. You don't get to be tourists.
No.
Okay. All right. And then from there, then you load up and you go with landing ships
Right into Korea, yeah.
into Korea. Okay. Now, once you got ashore in Korea and you shot your pheasant, then what happens?
Well, we were in hand-to-hand, more or less hand-to-hand combat. I mean, pushing the northward, you know, and because the North Koreans had come way south at that time, and we had started right out, and it was, they would push us, we would push them back and forth. Our equipment was lousy. I mean, there were a lot of our equipment was Second World War, and it was wore out.
Mm-hmm. Now, did the enemy have tanks at this point?
No, they did not.
Okay.
They did not.
All right. And then were you eventually back at the Pusan Perimeter?
Yes.
You go back that way?
Yes.
All right. Now, were you functioning, you said, okay, you were trained as a mechanic, but you're carrying a BAR, so are you now just a regular foot soldier?
Right.
Okay.
I was when I was with Company L, and then I got hurt, and I went into headquarters company because they'd sent me back there, and that's when I become a mechanic over there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got so bad, short of troops, when I recuperated a little bit, then they sent me to A company, and at that time my records got so screwed up that guys that I went over there with were coming home, and the A company, they didn't know that how long I'd been there, and consequently I was held over, and I kept going to my company commander and saying, "Now this is not right. well, our records show this and that, and I said, well, they're wrong. So he says, the only way you're gonna find out is if you go to battalion headquarters. And I said, well, is that possible? He says, yeah, you can take the day and go to battalion headquarters, which was 20 miles back. I says, is there any way I can get help to get there? You gotta get there on your own, which I did. A British outfit was in motion, and they were going down the road, and they picked me up and took me, and it was quite interesting, but my records never did get straightened out. I was there a month after I'd been to battalion headquarters before I finally got orders to come home.
Right, because you're there over a year, and normally it was at that point men were just staying for a year and rotating
Right,
out.
that's correct.
Okay, let's go back to the kind of the beginning of your arrival in Korea. What did Korea look like to you when you got there? What do you remember about it?
Just, well, what we first seen was just a bunch of brush and hills, is what we'd seen, and we didn't really know what to expect, and we learned.
Right. And so it's, I mean, now as you moved inland, I mean, was there still more hills, or was there farmland, or?
Oh, well, there was rice paddies and there was hills and stuff like that, you know. I mean, you'd wade through the rice paddies and get shot at and lay down and all that stuff. And
Okay. Now, your cavalry division, and cavalry divisions are supposed to be sort of fully mobile and maybe have armor or something like that. Were you functioning pretty much just as infantry at that point?
yes, because there was no tanks brought in at that time, very little artillery, and it was just, they thought it was going to be a week or two ordeal, and it wasn't. Finally, we got tanks in and a lot of artillery.
Okay. Now, initially you're mostly getting pushed back, I guess, because you get pushed back to
Yes.
Pusan. Was your unit taking a lot of casualties at that
Yes,
point?
they were,
Okay.
a whole lot.
All right. And how good were you at kind of getting them out? And could you
Well,
get the wounded out? And
that was a chaos too. I mean, there was so few soldiers or people that if you didn't get a major injury, they patched you up and you stayed there. And this is the way it was.
yeah, if you did get hurt badly, could they get you out pretty quickly?
Sometimes 2 or 3 days before they could move, because we were constantly in a push or pull. And
All right. Now, was most of your moving on foot, or could you get on trucks, or?
sometimes we'd get on trucks when the road was, it was a 2-track, if it was available, that, you know, the enemy hadn't had roadblocks and stuff, but we would pull back 4 or 5 miles and then they would hit us again.
Okay. Now, at that stage, did the enemy mostly have small arms, or did they have artillery, or?
Small arms.
Okay. And what impression did you have of the North Koreans at that point?
Well, they had no, I'm trying to think of the word, but life to them was nothing. It just didn't mean nothing. Their officers said do this, do that. Of course ours did too, but our society was a little different than theirs.
So they were not worried about what kind of casualties they took?
No, they were not.
They would just charge at you?
That's right.
Okay. Now, would they attack mostly at night or during the day, or?
Both,
Okay.
but night was the worst.
Yeah, I mean, how do you deal with a night attack? I mean, how do you?
Well, you stay awake, and you're out in areas where, you know, you have people out a little further than what the actually company is, or,
Right.
and then if something happens, then they fall back, and then you have a kind of a line,
Right.
and we went through a lot of that.
And then you just start shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, once you kind of get back, eventually the front sort of stabilizes, at least officially, around Pusan. So you're holding a perimeter there. So were you on the lines of the Pusan Perimeter, or were you hit by then, or?
I was with them, yes. I was in that line of defense, but they would break through different areas, and then we, of course, would either have to fight our way back or stuff like that. But eventually, we did get a halt and start pushing back. But
Okay, and then so could you kind of sense a change at a certain point, or the mood changes, or did you get more equipment, or?
well, we got more equipment, yes, and there was a change because the younger generation, younger soldiers, they didn't know what war was, including myself. I mean, it was something different. I mean, you didn't, when you're in basic training or Fort Carson, you didn't stand and shoot at somebody or try to shoot at somebody. You were just doing the normal thing. But over there, when it got into that, it was different, altogether different.
Okay, so some of you guys, if you've been there a little while and you're still going and haven't been hit, you kind of learn how to fight?
Well, you learn how to protect yourself some, but you could be there and not be thinking, and you could, you know, there was so much stuff going on that no.
Not right now, Doc. There you go.
It was hard. It was a tough lesson to learn.
Yeah, I mean, how good were they at keeping you supplied with food and ammunition, that kind of thing?
They were good. I'm not going to say excellent, but they were good. There was days that we didn't get nothing to eat. We'd go 2 or 3 days sometimes without anything to eat, and then your rations and stuff would catch up with you. But because we would go this way, we would go that way, and once we really got a foothold into things and learned something, then we started pushing north.
Right. Okay. And now, when did you hear, how much did you know about the rest of the war? I mean, so there's the Incheon landing happens up farther north, close to Seoul. I mean, were you getting news about that pretty quickly, or were you just ordered to move forward? And
we were just ordered to move. And this is what I say, there was a lot of chaos over there. The commander here didn't know what the commander over here was doing. And the higher ups, they really didn't know what was going on up front either. And
so you start moving, and now were you surprised that the North Koreans were giving way and retreating, or did you think you'd beaten them by then?
we were surprised that they were backing up because their supply lines had dwindled, and that's where we made progress, is because they had no supply lines and their supplies were limited. And therefore we managed to get into a push, and they didn't have nothing, so they had to back up.
Right. Okay. And now at that point, you're moving up north. Did you go through Seoul, or did you go around it? Or?
We were right on the outskirts of Seoul, yes.
Okay. Now at that point, did you think it was pretty much over?
No.
Okay. So,
I did not.
all right, and why not?
Well, because there was skirmishes every night. There was nothing quiet. I mean, sometimes during the day it would be just quiet as could be, but then the minute darkness come in, it wasn't.
Okay. So the enemy are still out there.
Oh yeah,
They
they're
have
out
not
there.
given up entirely at that point. Okay. Now, do you have a sense of how far north you moved into North Korea?
Well, over the whole war, we moved all the way through up into Manchurian border one time.
Okay, so you get up pretty close to China. Now, at what point did you start encountering Chinese troops?
That was in the fall. The Chinese come in, and that was a big surprise. It was just, we had heard that they were coming from other outfits, and they had no feeling of life either. I mean, they were just masses of soldiers, and 1 out of 3 of them did not have a weapon. He had a stick. If a guy got shot, he'd grab his weapon and they kept right on coming. And we had barbed wire out at places, and that was no phase to them at all. The first wave would lay on it, the second wave would go over it. So.
Did any of the Chinese appear behind you?
Oh yes,
Okay.
yes.
And when you found out they were Chinese behind you, what do you do?
Well, you follow your orders, of course, but a lot of times we had to fight our way out to withdraw. And it was, you know, like I say, chaotic.
Right. Now, did you have some good leadership at the kind of platoon company level? Did your officers or sergeants know what they were doing?
Most of the sergeants did, but most of the officers did not, that were close. We had officers, of course, that had been in the Second World War, but they were not really up there where it was going on.
Right.
And
because the lieutenants would have been younger guys, probably.
yeah, we had second lieutenants that they weren't no smarter than we were. They would ask the first sergeant what was going on. And I had a first sergeant by the name of Kelly. And he'd been in the Second World War, and he's the one that said when we landed, anything that way you shoot.
All right. And was he still with you then when you were up in North Korea?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you have close calls or situations where you thought you might get captured or totally overrun?
At one point during my service over there, yes. When the Chinese come in and we'd been pushed back again, we would try to take a hill during the day and we'd get it. They'd come in at night and run us off. Now this happened a lot, and I had one close buddy that his name was Duffy, and we'd lost a hill one night, and we retook it the next day, and he'd been left the night before, and they'd stabbed him in both arms and both legs, and it's a wonder he made it. But when we topped that hill, like I say, I carried a Browning, and I know there's 4 of them that I made, because they were right there.
All right. It's going to go back sort of to the sequence of things. You advanced up into North Korea. The Chinese start showing up all over the place and driving you back again. But your unit at least holds together well enough to get back out.
Well, we lost a lot of guys in that skirmishes.
Okay. Now, did you get hit at any point during that part of the campaign, or does that?
Yes, I got hit near Wagwan, Korea. I got hit with phosphorus grenade. I got burns.
That burned your arm, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
my hand. And that's when I was sent back and I got into headquarters company at that time.
All right. And when you went back to the headquarters company, what did you do with them?
I was back there for treatment, and then that's where I was.
Okay.
I had been a mechanic
Right.
in Colorado, so they left me there, and to try to keep that junk equipment running, which it was junk. It really was. You take a Jeep out, and if you run that 20 miles, you had to stop and put spark plugs in it. Now that's bad.
Now, was this all World War II vintage stuff at this point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Okay. All right. And then how long did you stay with the headquarters company?
About 3 months, and then of course the conflicts were rough, and then they transferred me out of there to A Company, and that's where I stayed until I got out of there.
All right. And by the end of your time there, had things stabilized? Did you have kind of more of a front that didn't move so much? Because you're talking about taking a hill and being pushed off of it. Were you kind of in trench lines now, or?
It was more or less the same routine, because the Chinese had no feeling whatsoever, and you could sit there at night and you could smell marijuana. I mean, the sky was just terrible with it, and you could just sit right there and say, okay, we're going to get hit tonight. And when the Chinese did come into the conflict, they come in and they used bugles. when they were going to attack, they used bugles. You could tell the minute you heard a bugle go off that they were coming. And you prepared yourself, but there was so many of them against the few of us that we had to back up.
Okay, because when you go and you take a hill, were you able to dig in and fortify, or did you just have to stay on top of the hill? Or
Oh, we would dig in it the best we could, but like I say, we'd go up in the daytime and they would come right after dark, and you had very little time to do much digging.
right?
And but we did what we could, and we had spotters out ahead of the main line, but they would come in and just kick the daylights out of us.
Right. And then did you have rear lines or positions you could go back into? I mean, were there more permanent fortifications?
When we started off on the hill, we was started off because there was no stopping. We would fight our way back, try to protect everybody.
Yeah. But did you have basically sort of behind your front lines, were there more permanent defenses? Would anybody, by the time you left, were there bunkers and things that you would fight out of? Or?
No.
Okay. So it's still pretty fluid most of that time.
Yes, it was.
All right. Now, did you had the sort of the 3 months there? You're with the headquarters company. Now, when you're in the rear, how far from the front line were you? Was that?
Probably 5 miles at that
Okay.
time.
Now, at that distance, were there any Korean civilians around, or were they all?
Oh
gone?
yeah, you had to watch out for civilians at all times because you didn't know whether it was enemy or whether it was just a refugee.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a Korean young fella attached to our outfit, and when the refugees would start back, he would, of course, they would come through our lines. He would stand there and he would look these people over, and he'd say, "Take that one right there. He's a North Korean." They could tell the way they handled themselves, or how they walked, if they had anything on their feet or if they didn't. I mean, he was an interpreter for us, which was really good. And we had a lot of reconnaissance too out of headquarters company, where we would go ahead of the line some. And at one time, that's one of the reasons I got a headquarters company too, is because I started breaking down. And with the infiltration and stuff, one night we went out, there was 14 of us went out on a mission to see what was going on, and we run into a North Korean reconnaissance outfit as well, and we stepped off and let them go by. Well, when we stepped back on, one of them got confused, and when we come back there was 15 instead of 14, and that was a little bit crazy.
So so one of them just went with you?
Yeah, because you don't talk.
Okay.
You just move, and it's dark, and
So you were supposed to be a mechanic. What were you doing on a patrol?
well, back at that time, you done whatever they told you to do. Because I mean, if you worked on a Jeep today, you may be out patrolling at night because there was a lot of troops. We were pretty well thinned out. I mean, compared to the Chinese and the North Koreans, they had us probably 5 or 6 to 1, 10 to 1 people, which is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little different.
Okay, so they're just putting you where they need you.
That's right.
Okay. And so you found that being attached to headquarters was more scary than being with a line company?
Well, in ways, yes, because like I say, they would send you out at night, and because at times we were completely surrounded, and you'd go out and try to see what was going on, but and it bothered me going back of the lines, because a couple times we were gone for 2 or 3 days, and you don't pack that much food, and sometimes you stole what you ate.
So you'd have to sneak into North Korean positions or something, and
Well, no, anything like civilians.
okay,
You would go into these little villages type things and steal their rice or whatever you could get, and it was hairy.
okay. Well, if you get trapped behind the lines, do you just hide someplace and wait for dark and?
Right, that's what we done. We dig in the brush or something, and nobody would move, nobody would say anything. And when it get dark, you would move again.
All right. So did you ask to be sent back to the line, or did they just decide to send
Well, no, I didn't actually ask to go back, but A Company was really short on men. So they did ask if there was anybody who wanted to volunteer, which I did. I went back up to the line with A Company because I felt a little more secure, to be honest about it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, at this stage in the war, do you have much by way of artillery support or air support, that kind of thing?
Not when it first started, but after it got really going, then we had air support, yes. And we started getting artillery in there, and eventually we got tanks in there.
Mm-hmm. And then what could you use the tanks for?
They just would protect where the roads were, because you couldn't get off, it was so hilly. They would protect for withdrawals and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about it. They would, if they got where they could get off the roads, then they used artillery pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now, were these Sherman tanks at this point, or the old World War II ones?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because a Sherman could fire like a howitzer if it wanted to.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, did you get a chance to kind of go anywhere further into the rear? Did you ever get into Seoul or any place else?
Oh yeah, I'd been in Seoul.
Yeah. And why would you go there?
Well, at different times you would kind of get what they would reserve type thing. They would let you off the line, your company, and you had some freedom, which we did. I mean, we were around Seoul, and we've been into Seoul, and we'd been in reserve, and this one guy, this southern guy that was a friend of mine, the North Koreans didn't have air support. They had a Piper Cub. Where they got it, nobody knows, but that was they would come over like a bivouac area or something like that, and they would throw grenades out. And we'd had this happen quite a few times. So this guy's name was Fortner, and he took a whole day and took 50 caliber machine gun loads apart and made a whole string of tracers. And that plane come over, and he got up with a 50 caliber, and of course they were all tracers. He shot it down, and he shot so many times that the barrel bent on the 50 caliber. So
Yeah, because it gets hot, so
Yeah.
it melts. Yeah. All right. So why did he go all tracers?
because that way he could tell where his bullets were going.
Okay. And a Piper Cub isn't very tough anyway.
No,
So
no,
if
they're
you
not.
hit it with tracers, enough of them, you'll still shoot it down.
Yeah.
Okay. So he's just doing this on his own while you're supposedly on.
Well, he got
the
tired
river?
of being having grenades thrown out at us all the time, and one day he just said, "I'm going to get that," because we could shoot at it, and that's why he made it all tracers, because then he could tell where it was going.
Right. Now, were you getting much news at all about either how the rest of the war was going or about anything back home?
No,
Okay.
we did not.
Did you hear about MacArthur getting replaced? Or just,
I seen MacArthur in Korea.
okay.
I was within 80 feet of him.
All right. And how did that happen?
Well, he had to have protection when he was there, and consequently we were assigned to protect him. And when he come up, no. So
Was he just riding around in a Jeep, or did he go in to meet with people in headquarters? Or
He met with people in headquarters, yes, but he more or less wanted to see what was going on, and they cautioned him on it a number of times, but he still went to see what he could find out. The fact is, he was more aggressive than some of the head officers that we had over there.
now, did you see him? Was it when you were moving north that he came to see you, or was
No,
it
that was after
thing-
we'd been pushed back.
Okay, but he did come out and take a look for himself.
Oh yeah.
All right. Okay. Now, you said you got wounded twice. And once was the white phosphorus on the arm. What was the other occasion?
I got some shrapnel from the 23rd Regiment of the Army, the 3rd Division, had got cut off in a town.
Mm-hmm.
And they come and they said, they took our company and they said, put us on tanks. And we went in to get them in this town. And before we got in there, they had roadblocks set up that we had to fight through. And it took us 2 days to get in there, but after we once got started, of course, we went through, but we had to get off the tanks and go up on the hills and so on. And I got shrapnel from that. And
Now, did they send you to the rear to get patched up, or you
no, they
just
did
stay
not.
right on the
See,
line?
this is the problem, one of the big problems. There's so many Korean veterans that never got recognized
Mm-hmm.
or got Purple Hearts where they should. It's ridiculous to me, because we were so short on troops that I got hit up in the arm and I got some on this leg, and all they done is patch you, and you stayed right there. And unless it was really life-threatening, and then of course they took you back. But it was quite ironic.
Yeah. Okay, that would have been maybe the spring of '51 at that point.
Yep, February.
Yeah, because that was part of our counterattack after they had pushed us back south. Then we pushed back north, and
Yeah.
because that's a fairly famous battle actually that you were part of. At
Yeah,
least as Korean
well,
War
they
battles go.
surrounded this company in this 23rd Regiment in this town, and I can't tell you the name of the town because I can't pronounce them, but we were sent in to help them get out.
Right.
And no.
All right. Now, did you get any kind of leave time while you were in Korea? Could you go to Japan, or actually?
No, I did not.
So your unit maybe moves to the rear occasionally, but that's as much break as you get.
That's as much as I got. They started what they called an R&R, but I never got in on that because I'd transferred different places.
Right.
And like I say, my records, you can contact them today and they can't tell you where all I'd been.
Right.
So,
All right. Did you communicate at all with people at home while you were overseas?
when we could. I wrote some letters, yes, but and I got some mail, some through the mail. And I shouldn't say this maybe, but I had an uncle that somehow or another he got a packaged up we got a bottle of liquor through the mail. And that was quite different.
Because at this point, enlisted men, it's not like, sometimes like in Vietnam, there was a beer ration or things like that.
Well, eventually we did. We got some 3.2 beer in our rations.
Right.
But that was few and far between at the beginning.
Yeah, and anything harder than that, enlisted men don't normally get.
No.
All right. Now, did you get other kinds of care packages? Would people try to, send you food or warm clothing or anything like that?
I never got any of that, no. Because it was touch and go, and it was tough.
Okay. Now, in that last month while you were there, and you were trying to convince them to let you go home, did you just have miscellaneous duties, or were you back as a mechanic again?
No, I was on front line with A Company. We
Okay.
were up on the line, and I was in the mortar section at that time.
All right. But you had been back to the rear and argued, and then you were sent back to the company?
Oh yeah, I
Okay.
had to go back to the company, yes.
All right. And do you remember how you finally got the orders to go home?
I don't, no I don't, but like I say, I argued with the company commander and
Mhm.
they said, well, if you want to go back to headquarters, okay. I said, can I get help to go back? No, you
Yeah.
got to get back there, which I did.
Mhm.
Like I say, a British outfit was on the move and they had stopped for their tea time is what it was. And then they give me a lift back there. And I went all the way through trying to get straightened out and argued here and argued there and they sent me back up to the line and then it took 30 days before I was off the line.
Right. Well, did you see any other UN troops? I mean, you saw British. Did you see anybody else?
No, I did not. I seen British, but that was it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now, in the later stages of the fighting, when it's a lot of it's Chinese over there, did they have artillery or just mortars or not even that?
Well, they had, after a fashion, they did. They had tanks, small tanks. They had artillery and stuff like that. After they got in there and pushed us back, but
Yeah.
this is one of the reasons that they lost. Is that we got to pushing them back again is because their supply lines were so stretched out that they didn't have nothing. They would run out of ammunition and everything. So.
All right. Okay. So you finally get the word. Okay, you're going to go home. How do they get you out of Korea?
Well, by boat. By boat. They went back to a stabilizing area where new troops were coming in, old ones were going out, and that's the way it was.
And then did you sail straight back to the States, or did you stop places on the way?
I come straight back
Okay. And where did you land in the U.S.?
in California.
Okay. And then once you get back, do you get a leave to go home, or?
After a fashion, yes. I mean, we were assigned different areas. Like I was sent back to Fort Carson, and then I was allowed a 30-day leave.
What was it like to go home after all that?
It was scary. There again, I went to Chicago with some guys, and I should have come on home, but I didn't. We got partying and carrying on because one of them lived in Chicago, and fact is, we took a car and come clear up into Michigan one night to a dance hall over by Hastings. I should have come on home, but I didn't. I went back with the gang, and then a day later, I got on a train in Chicago to come to Grand Rapids, which I wasn't too, for my age, I shouldn't have been drinking, I know, but, you know, this is one thing I got against the drinking age right now is you can go over there and get shot, but you can't have a beer or a drink.
Mhm.
And this to me is lousy.
And at that point, you couldn't vote either.
No. When I come back, you could vote. But there was a sergeant on this train when I was coming from Chicago to Grand Rapids, and I admit I was wasted. Tie off on the side and all that stuff, and he took me into John and straightened me out. I was sick, and he gave me fact is, he gave me a drink too to stabilize me. But
All right. Now, were you not sure what kind of reception you were going to get when you got home at that point, or just weren't ready to deal with it?
I had a good reception when I got home. It was hard because my mother had 3 good daughters and my 3 sisters. They were kind of in apartments and stuff. When I was in Korea, this is another thing I got a problem with, and people say, well, how come you don't give to the Red Cross? Well, I probably will now, maybe, someday. But my mother burnt out, and she had my 3 sisters, and they each got 2 pair of underwear and 2 pair of socks, and that's what they got from the Red Cross. So I have no feelings for the Red Cross whatsoever.
So was your mother not able to work after a while, or?
Well, my mom, she was a working mother, yes, after my dad died.
Yeah.
So she worked and she got, like I say, her apartment got burned out.
Oh, burned. Oh, physically burned. Okay, like a fire.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
they lost everything.
Okay.
And then when they get 2 pair of underwear and 2 pairs of socks, I don't think that's very good, anyway, for me anyway,
Right.
from the Red Cross. And fact is, when we landed in California, coming back from over there, you had a Red Cross outfit here, and you had a Salvation Army over here, and they wanted you to pay for a cup of coffee and a donut. The Red Cross did, and the Salvation Army was over here giving it away. People don't know that stuff, but it's the truth.
Yeah, yeah. That's sort of part of why we do these interviews. It's the miscellaneous details you wouldn't get otherwise. Now, were you sending money home while you were overseas, or did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did. When I first went in the service, I've got papers right here that tells where I had money going to my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was it. Yeah, I sent her $40 a month out of my allotment, which that was an allotment for her and my family, but we didn't get that much money either a month, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. I guess you didn't have a whole lot of use for money over in Korea most of the time.
well, no, we didn't, because there was no place to use it, you know. And at that time, we didn't even get paid over there because you couldn't spend it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we finally did get something, then I would send a lot of it home because you couldn't spend it, you know.
Right. Okay. All right. So you get back, you visit with family, but you still have to finish your enlistment.
Yes.
So back to Fort Carson.
Back to Fort Carson.
Okay. And now, what did you do when you were back there?
I was just in an artillery outfit, armored artillery, just normal duty work.
Now, were you a mechanic or something else?
Yeah, I'd done mechanic work when I was back there, yeah. And
And did they make any effort to encourage you to re-enlist?
yes, they did.
Okay. What did they offer you?
Well, at this time, I can't remember anything that the offers, but they did. They tried to get everybody to enlist again. But I'd already had an extension on my enlistment, so I said no.
If you re-enlisted, would you go back to Korea, or did they not?
They didn't. They wouldn't say. I mean, you just enlisted and you went back to normal stuff. But there was a lot of guys from Korea that did not re-enlist.
Right. Okay. So when do you get discharged then?
In September 1952.
Okay. Now, once you're out of the Army, what do you do?
Well, I got discharged at Fort Carson, Colorado. I was let go at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I had a 1947 Chevy Coupe, and when I got final papers at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I threw everything I owned in this car, and I left Fort Carson, Colorado, and headed for Grand Rapids.
All right.
And I never stopped except for fuel till I got here, and my aunt and uncle lived over on Paris Street, and at that time I didn't quite know where my mother was. She'd been shipped to different apartments. So I drove in my aunt and uncle's yard 24 hours later in the dark, and I was so tired that I never shut the car off. And eventually my aunt seen a car, and she sent my uncle out there, and here I was.
All right. Now, once you're back, do you go find a job somewhere? What do you do?
When I come back, yes, I had a number of jobs when I got back. I hauled coal. I worked for a coal company. I worked for a gravel company, and I worked in a paint factory. And I got a job for a trucking company. I worked for U.S. Truck Company for 5 years. And then that kind of, I used, when I met my first wife, I was working for Interstate Truck Company. She was an office employee, and that's kind of different too, but had left that and I went for U.S. Truck Company, and one weekend I went out to Ramona Park out here when they had Ramona Park with the boat and the Ferris wheels and all that, and I talked to her in the office, and I met her out there, just out there bumming around, and we started going together and we married.
All right. Now, did you find a long-term job, or did you just kind of move
Yes.
around? Okay. What did you wind up doing?
I wound up, I worked for Culligan Water Conditioning for 35 years.
Okay. And what were you doing for them?
I started out as a delivery driver and ended up as a supervisor.
Okay. All right.
I got my master's plumber's license through them.
All right. Now, to look back at the time that you spent in the Army, how do you think that affected you, or what did you take out of it?
Well, I learned a lot, like the mechanical part and stuff like that. I learned a lot in that. But I don't know, the Korean conflict kind of got to me a lot. I almost got a divorce. I mean, this was 3 years after I was out of the service.
Right.
I woke up one night choking my wife. And
Yeah. Well, you had what we would now call PTSD or whatever,
Yes.
that kind of thing.
Yes.
Now, in those days, was there any kind of support that you could get from anybody? or-
no, there wasn't. There wasn't. And fact is, I didn't even seek anything from the government for a long, long time. I'm with the VA now, of course, but that was a hassle too.
Yeah, certainly was. All right. Now, I guess when you got back, I mean, did you talk to anybody about what you did in Korea, or did
No.
anyone ever ask you?
No.
Okay.
This one thing, it become easier to do over the years. I mean, like I say, it's been 60 years ago, 60 some years ago, and it's not so bad to talk about it now, but back then it was, people try to talk to you and you would change the subject because you don't want to tell people that you actually shot somebody or whatever, but and what you went through over there, people don't believe you anyway. They don't believe you today what you actually went through over there. Like my buddy Duffy. I mean, we lost a hill and went up the hill the next day and fought back up there, and here he was, stabbed,
Okay.
all four his arms and legs.
But that is something that, if you read your history and so forth enough, you'll go, yeah, they really did that stuff.
They
But I
did.
guess most people, they can't imagine another human being doing that to
And
someone else.
they can't imagine, like I said, when the Chinese come in, they had no feelings whatsoever, and 1 out of 3 of them didn't even have a weapon. He had a stick, and that barbed wire didn't mean nothing to them.
No.
They would lay on that and come over, and we had close hand-to-hand combat a number of times. But I got something that I've got a picture right up there that this Duffy, they talk about Beetle Bailey today,
Yep.
okay? I want to show this if I can. This picture was drawn of me by Duffy in 1950.
Wow. I want to just see if I can. That's not going to. That does show fairly well. Okay, so they'll see that in the video. Cool. So he did a caricature there of you.
That
Okay.
was just before we went overseas and then into Korea. But
Now, when Vietnam happened, what did you think of that?
well, I felt for the guys because they had tough going too. They really did. But I got a bad attitude about it, and I hate to say it, but I do. Anything you hear today is Vietnam, 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 or Afghanistan, or Afghanistan, but you don't hear a damn word about the Korean veterans.
Right. That's part of why we're talking to you right now, because they went through an awful lot more casualties in a shorter period of time than you had in Vietnam, and certainly than the more modern wars. And both the crazy war you were in and the trench warfare at the end, that was pretty hard
I mean,
stuff.
when they finally settled down to where they were starting to negotiate, then we had trenches, which on hills, but that didn't mean that the war stopped.
Right.
I mean, they would continually fight. And when I guess I'm bitter about it, but when we would go over there and we had no good equipment when we went in there, and the winter time come, we did not have no winter boots or winter clothes or gloves. We fought the winter as well as we did the enemy, and to me that our government was lousy.
They were not prepared. Yeah.
We were unprepared all the way around. Officers, men. I mean, my outfits that I were in, none of the soldiers and stuff really had any knowing what combat was. The only thing you could do is rely on, like I said, I had a first sergeant. His name was Kelly, and we relied on him so much that and he finally died or got killed in Alaska. And I found out years later, I'd met him here in Grand Rapids when he became an officer. He'd been in the Army so long that he became a major. He went up through the ranks, and I met him out to our where we have our
Well, it's a VFW post or?
no, reserves.
Oh, reserves. Okay.
Yeah, he was at the reserves here. He stopped there, and I kept in contact with him for quite a long time. And he said he was coming, and I stopped and seen him.
All right, this tape. All right, we were talking at the point when the tape ran out. You'd mentioned that your sergeant Kelly had eventually stayed in the Army and become an officer. And so you saw him in Grand Rapids. He was a major. Now, did you? And it was with the reserve unit that he went and visited. Did you stay in the reserves yourself?
No, I did not. I did not. But I kept in contact with him for a number of years, and when like I say, I found out he was headed for Alaska. But he was stopping here for some reason to see the reserves or something, and I did meet with him and talk to him for a while,
and then he got killed in Alaska?
Yes, in a plane accident.
Okay. Happened. And when was that roughly?
Oh, golly.
Maybe in the 60s by then?
Yeah, it was quite a while after the Korean. I was in Korea. I was trying to think. It seems like it was in the early 60s.
All right. Now, did you join any veterans organizations or things like that after you got back?
I've been with the American Legion, and I've been with that other club.
There's VFW.
VFW, I belong to them in Florida right now.
Okay. So do you spend winters in Florida now?
I used to. I haven't the last year because I've had health problems too, and
it gets harder.
It's harder. I'm going through a bunch of tests right now. They don't really know what to expect.
Okay.
But,
all right. All right. Now, I guess to look back on the whole thing, would you do it over again?
I would do it over again if the times were like that, but today I would not. Because, like I say, I know the chaos that we had over there and stuff like that, and the lousy, poor equipment and stuff. And if I was to, they asked me to go again, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go.
All right.
I mean, I love my country, don't misunderstand me. Fact is, I got a lot of stuff around here that's red, white, and blue. I don't know if you've noticed any of it or not, but I do. And like I say, I wouldn't go back again. And our Veterans Administration stinks. It really does. I mean, you got to go through so much to get any help that it's pathetic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are also kind of local organizations that support veterans of different kinds. There's vet centers, and we have things like the Veterans Home in Grand Rapids and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of those groups sort of fill in the gaps, or?
Oh, I've met with some of them, yes. Fact is, I got a plaque on the wall from up there that I received last year from them.
Mm-hmm.
It was a motorcycle organization
Right.
and stuff.
Right. Patriot Guard.
And I'd had interviews with a guy by the name of Pickle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know him?
Yeah, he's the guy that got me connected to you.
Oh, well, okay. But yeah, Doug Pickle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So you got support in the community at least, and
yes, yes.
and you've gotten at least some things out of the VA eventually. It just hasn't been easy.
But
Yeah.
I was really surprised at that deal last year. I really was, and I'm so appreciative of them that they really, there's a few organizations that step up for the Korean veterans.
And now, since you've come and recorded the story with us, then people a very long time from now are going to be able to see you tell your story and find out what it was actually like to be over there. So I'd just like to close here by thanking you for taking the time to talk to me today.
I'm glad that it's been so many years that it's easier to talk.
All right. Yeah.